nice introduction. I'll be talking about Botetourt Gunsmiths and some of their products. It's a very big subject at this point, and so I won't be talking about all of the ones that we've documented, but be going through a number that have been. At present, depends on where you cut off Botetourt County, because in 1770 it was chopped into many different counties over the time. But for instance, Greenbrier, West Virginia in the 1770s is Botetourt and so forth. So, but in the close proximity to the current county, we've documented about 28 Master Gunsmiths starting in 1756. And so, and I say we because early on in the 60s, Rod Moore and I were working together, tracking down Botetourt Gunsmiths and working in the archives in Richmond, at State Library and so forth. And at one time, obviously, a very nice collection of those guns. So we're joining up on that. And since that time, I've continued occasionally to work on various aspects of it. Okay, you can't hear me back there? Is that better?
Yeah, a little closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better.
Okay.
A little more if you can.
A little more if you can.
A little more?
Yeah.
Okay. We got feedback before, so it will blast your ears. I'll stay close to it like this and see if I can find this, how this machine works. So, and this is supposed to be the Blue Ridge, but it's actually my backyard where I had these big rocks put in. I missed the mountains. And if you don't believe it, as they say in Southwest Virginia, hide and watch. So, now, I've never dedicated a lecture to my family, but this is coming home to me. That's 1927. My father, Lester Miller Gusler, on McAfee's Knob, and it's named for the McAfee family, which was really some of the early long hunters of Kentucky, leaving from here and blazing the trail out into Kentucky. And for part of my life, I was a rock climber of cliffs and so forth. And when I started doing that at age 35, my dad was rather upset with me. So I got this picture out and I said, well, as a little boy, I was looking at that and that's what inspired me. So he didn't have a real answer for that. Anyway, he's in those riding boots, and as a little boy, I always remember him, the ritual of lacing those up and so forth. And, you know, that's what a man really was. He was a timberman all his life. And he and my mother, Ollie Gusler, as she went by, were both born in Carbon's Cove. Now it's the water supply for Roanoke City. And Mr. William Carbon is who it's named for. And he was an important figure in the history here. Very, very active Indian trader. And he raised lots of cattle and herdsmen out of here up through Stanton and off to different places during the period. But Carbon's Cove was named for him. And I was the last child born in Carbon's Cove in 1942. So they were the last holdouts against the water company. And that year, I was not quite 1 year old, and the house burned, and they lost everything that they had except what they were wearing. I was the sitter. That's the only reason I didn't get burned up. And, I know a lot of people wished I had. Anyway, so, and then at the bottom there you can see my friends from what was called then Fort Lewis Road, and now it's called Fort Lewis Church Road. But I like that it's the State Route 777, because 7 is such a good lucky number. But these guys, we grew up together, trying to learn to make flintlocks and shoot them and hunting and so forth. And Gary ended up at Virginia Tech and learned to be a forester, but he decided to come to Williamsburg and work in the gun shop instead of spending his life in forestry. And so we'll move on, but this is kind of a homecoming to me. Kegley's volumes on the Virginia frontier and Stoner's book are the best resources for learning in this area that I know of, other than going to original documents. This book I got by inheritance from Liza Pitzer and Charles Lewis Pitzer, her father, owned this book. He was one of the sponsors in Roanoke, and so I got this one and I about worn it out. I really like the cover because it shows you the confines of Botetourt County in 1770 when it was formed. And so you can see it's Kentucky and Illinois and a lot of other places. And it went to the Mississippi River. And as I recall, Augusta County, from which it was cut, the charter said to the Mississippi River or the ocean beyond. But you know, in 1770, they aren't really taxing these French people over here on the Mississippi and Ohio River and so forth. But these are the really good information on Botetourt, particularly cross-section of cultural events. My talk isn't completely chronological, and so I wanted to mix it up and show you some interesting pieces. You can see the top one is John Wilson, Craig's Creek, BC. So he's in Botetourt County on Craig's Creek, not far from where it empties into the Jackson, and the cow pasture come together there to form the James River. I call it the headwaters of the James Group. And you'll notice that John Seitz, who's working in Fincastle, is using the same plate, the same design. And Thomas Simpson is from the family up there in the headwaters of the James. And they were there very early on in the 1740s. And one thing that intrigues me, if you notice, even though they're, if you notice, the handwriting looks very similar. And who's teaching them Latin? The Fecit is for maker in Latin. It's an artist's signature on paintings and other things, but these are the only Kentucky rifles that I know that have this association with Botetourt County. And in 1785, Fincastle established a seminary. They were very interested in education, and so this is probably Tudor. Notice the F on the Fecit is slightly different, but he puts F and the E stands alone, and then CIT is all together. Now, when Thomas Simpson made this, he's out in East Tennessee. He was out in East Tennessee in 1775, 76, in what was called the Watauga settlement, where they were renting from the Cherokee. But his rifle is closely tied with the work in the upper part of the James, which goes back to the 1750s and 40s maybe. The earliest rifle that, one of the two earliest rifles I know of from Virginia is from that school in the Upper James. And this is probably an early Simpson rifle. It's got Johannes Farber on the side plate in a dialect German script. And it's descended in the family in Stanton. And Alexander Simpson in the family was in a factory during the Revolution in Stanton with a clockmaker and Joshua Perry, a rifle maker, and I don't remember all their names at the moment, but 4 of them had a factory, and they applied to the government for exemption from drafting because it was running their factory for making rifles and implements of war, as the paper said. But Alexander Simpson, by 1781, was back in Botetourt, and he repaired guns for the militia in 1781 and rented pasturage. And we'll talk more about Alexander toward the end of this lecture. But this is a French and Indian War rifle, one of the earliest ones known to survive, not just in Botetourt, not just in Virginia, but Indian whole American long rifle together. It was found in a crawl space in Stanton back in the 1960s. This is illustrated in Giles Cromwell's book on the magnificent Virginia material he put together over the years. One of those books is self-published. And I owned this for about 20 years at one point. And it started as almost a giveaway, and its value has gone up, up, up. And it's an original flintlock. And there was a Civil War cartridge box with the man's initials. He went out at 16 years old carrying this rifle that was probably in the French and Indian War. And you could tell it was his initials because they were scratched on the rifle, and they were scratched in the leather. He was dyslexic, and his D is backwards on the photo. Now, one guy sold this but refused to keep it together. Thought he'd make more money. It's so aggravating. And yours truly made the sliding wooden matchbox. The original was lost. And in the Revolution, they advertised rifles in the Virginia Gazette, box lid lost. it's not just a matter of time. They were losing them all the time. But a pretty wonderful rifle. The side plate, the top picture, has the Johannes Farber. And I've always called this the side plate finial group. And the features that identify are either a date or an inscription on the side, which is very unusual in most long rifles. And then the finial at the back, it has a restriction. This one has an acanthus leaf, but we'll be seeing a restriction with a vase, a restriction with a heart. And so that's all part of the identity of the school. And you can see this has fine carving around the breech tang here, and a true escutcheon, very close to some of the Indian trade guns. And all the mounts are engraved with a sort of primitive engraving. It's pretty good, but it's really unusual in this period. There's also a filing piece made by this same hand. I don't have pictures of it at the moment, but it was a shotgun, smoothbore, but it has exactly the same mounts, and they're in much more pristine condition. This one's stocked in maple. The shotgun is stocked in cherry. And he had made the barrel on the shotgun. Most of the time they get it from a broken English import because it's cheaper. But shotguns were the most normal thing in the back country of Virginia. In a survey of all the counties, from the beginning of the county to 1800, all the counties of the Shenandoah Valley, actually I surveyed, but I had lots of people helping. Rod did a section of that at Botetourt. Graduate students coming looking for theses. I got them to do part of this and get every will and inventory, the description of whether it's a knife, a tomahawk, a smooth bore, or whatever. So on the average, there are about 2/3 smooth bores in the back country of Virginia to 1/3 rifle. That's about the rifle gun. That's about the breakdown. And a great many people had a shotgun and a rifle. And the filing piece was the formal term for it, but on the Virginia frontier, it's just a gun or a rifle gun. And one of them said one round bore gun, so it's smooth bore. For those of you who are not familiar with rifling, the inside of the barrel is it's a smooth tube that has had grooves cut in it in a spiral direction. It spins a bullet, somewhat like when you throw a football, you have to put a spin on it to center it so that it gives you equal air pressure. I'm sure there's some ladies here who may not know that, and probably some males as well. I don't want to be too sexist. I get in trouble up here. And in an early inventory in Botetourt, there is a rifled pistol. And this is the point I wanted to make in this lecture. This man left in his will the rifle pit, his wife's rifled pistol. He left it in the will because nothing belonged to her. Even though he had given it to her, women were considered chattel, and she wouldn't have, unless he put that in the will, even though he had given it to her, when he's dead, she has no rights on that except the claim of dower. She had a certain amount that she could claim as dower, or she could go to the state if she thought it was going to clear all the debts. That's a big decision to make. So there are not many rifle pistols in Virginia inventories. One other one is administered in the 1740s. So we're looking for the tutor who was training these people over a long period of time. And in working through Augusta County records, I ran into a contract for a tutor in the 1740s, and the contract stipulated that he had to make the utmost attempt to protect the boys from an Indian attack. That was in the contract. This is the Thomas Simpson rifle, and you don't see it very well. That's the first photograph I saw in 1974. It was in Texas. I have better photographs of it. This is my earliest set. And this was made for a famous Tennessee, Gasper Mansker, silver plate on the door of the matchbox with his name on it. And he was sort of, if you want to say he's the Daniel Boone of Tennessee, that's probably pretty accurate. He was a famous frontiersman, and he had Mansker Station, and Simpson Shop was not far from there at that time. I wanted you to try to remember a couple things about this. Notice that I'm having trouble seeing this device. Notice that these scrolls on the side are recoiling and repeating, giving you a very baroque rhythm. We'll be seeing that on the John Wilson rifle from Botetourt. Smaller and different, but it is also made of a single piece of brass. And we usually call this a captured lid patch box. This is the latch for and it's silver. You slide that back this way and the door springs open. That was used for our patches used in leading. Finely carved, not a very good photograph of it, but finely relief carved curly maple. And here's the side plate, and notice the finial on this one is a base. The silver oval has 1791 on the date. And later, an Indian, a Cherokee chief, a Creek chief, requested of the government in a negotiation that he wanted a rifle like the one Mansker had. It's a superb piece of work. There are a lot of other features that tie these together. Here's the diamond on the cheek piece. It's a frequent motif on a lot of top pieces, but the engraving on this sets this one aside, apart. And I have a theory about this. The diamond represented steadfastness and toughness in the 18th century. And you can see this man had a good hand at Rococo decoration. So why did he put this straight-sided diamond on there? Because it means something different. And we don't know about what kind of militia flags these people had. There were different banners that they had, company to company. And don't think those were crude. Those were made of silk lettering and gilded and so forth. They were expensive. And they usually had cases with them with horn tips and staffs with a brass tip. big staffs with brass tips. And Mazda has a great Federal Eagle one in their collection from Shenandoah County, Virginia. Anyway, so I think that the overall shape of this is that, I went too far, didn't I? And I believe this, the flower is decoration. I think it also stands for the tree of life, since it has that stem at the bottom. And so when your cheek hits that, there's the responsibility of life and death, and the lethalness of a rifle shot is there. That's my theory about it, and I'll be glad to entertain anyone who thinks they can figure it out more than that. But there are several dozen of these, none as elaborate as this one that I've ever seen. The top of this is silver wire inlay. That inlay is it's rectangular in cross section, so it goes deep into the stock. You're reading it on the edge, it's like a ribbon. And on that side view, you can see how high that relief carving is. There's a bad photograph of it, but it's really artistically done. A pair of pistols from the Upper James, another variation of that side plate. This is getting probably after the Revolution. But this pair, we'll be encountering Virginian ordering pistols from the Simpsons. These are fine pistols, and their locks have stayed in the original. The acorn finials influenced from England, but this is very distinctive product of the back country. And you'll notice, rather than having the molding around the lock, let's see if I can get this thing without turning up the whole lecture. This is a silver wire inlaid in rather than a relief card feature. Now we're moving west to Kentucky because Simpson moved out there, and William Whitley, who built this house in the 1790s in Kentucky, one of the earliest brick houses out there. He was an Indian fighter. It was in Rockbridge County. Rockbridge was named after the natural bridge, and it was cut out of Augusta and Botetourt in 1778. One of the gunsmiths I've been tracking for years was in Augusta County, Botetourt, Rockbridge, and he hadn't moved anywhere. The jurisdictions had moved all around. But you notice that he was a very modest fellow. He put his WW and glazed headers on the front, and his wife's initials were on the back door. I guess he did put them on the front. So that's all we'll say about that. Now, this rifle is signed on the side plate. It's a side plate finial group. It's got an oval with Jacobs Young's signature. The Young family were in Botetourt. Fort Young is where Covington is today during the French and Indian War. And the Young family is hard to track down. They tend to not be, like many tradesmen, they don't have a lot of money, and they don't typically get in trouble. Now, Jacob Young was an exception because he got in trouble a lot out in the Wythe County area. And one guy said that he was famous for horse stealing, and he was a pretty rough character. And from Ranch the family moved to the Cumberland in 1790, and I think this rifle was made for William Whitley, and it was his rifle. He was killed at the Battle of Thames in 1813 up in Canada. 65 years old, he went out against the Indians. And there's a big controversy. It's believed by some that he and Tecumseh killed each other because one of the company of Whitley's said that Tecumseh was hit with a 2-ball load, and Whitley was known to put one ball and another patch ball on top, and they were found across from one another in the battle. But his rifle and his powder horn and a sash, which is Mississippi Indians. I'm having trouble remembering which ones, but anyway, they were brought back to the family. And fine curly maple. And if any of you collect this material, whether it's furniture or guns, notice this wonderful patina. Don't bother that. Don't clean it. People clean it. The patination on this is the record of the age. And if a rifle or a piece of furniture has been handled carefully over its lifetime of service, it's all those loving hands that have made that patina and kept it. And it is the record of the age. Don't go and destroy it because you want it to look new. Go get somebody to make you a new rifle. That's what you need. Don't shine it all up. Many collectors have this wonderful idea of finding an old chair, an old gun in the attic, untouched, right? Untouched. So that they can have the pleasure of burning it themselves or severely damaging it. And it is a serious matter. This again is a full cast box that hold pieces that are being made of separate pieces of brass. And you can see the engraving with the little knobs on the ends of the scrolls. That goes right back to that early Simpson rifle of the French and Indian War. And sometimes they used punches in this. But this was Mr. Whitley's rifle. And there you can see the Jacob Young. And Mr. Young was also modest. He put his name on top of the barrel and on the side plate, like Mr. Whitley put his name on the house. This is his powder horn, which is about 18 inches long. William Whitley, I am your horn. The truth I love and a lie I scorn. Fill me with the best of powder to make your rifle crack the louder. Now, when the rifle cracks, it's breaking the sound barrier. It sounds flat if you don't have enough charge. Most Indian shots were very muffled. Now, that's a wonderful beginning, but here's the rest of it. See how the dread, terrific ball makes Indians bleed or Tories fall? With you, your powder I'll supply for to defend your liberty. I just think that's fantastic. And what a great panel and all the carving. And Thomas Simpson made these powder horns, and Jacob Young's followed suit in the same style, the same turnings on the back and so forth. And it's professional great work all the way. I never could engrave that good. I mean, I just can't do that. It makes me mad. John Wilson, Craigs Creek, Botetourt County, B.C. It's not British Columbia, it's Botetourt County. What a great inscription. And he was born, as I recall, in 1818. So this is in the part of Craigs Creek that's still in Botetourt County. It's not way up further up the old road that was laid out by John Buchanan in 1748. 81 goes over Christiansburg Mountain, but the early road went up Craigs Creek, and because the grade was good. One of the Moravians coming through there in the 1750s said they crossed the creek 36 times today. Because you see that creek is real, that's a low grade, and it's much easier to travel than bucking the mountains that they put Interstate 81 through. The stock on this piece was redone right in the same, in the rough style of his work. I don't know whether it was his before he left or not. But here's the finest rifle I've seen by him, and it's signed J.N.O. Wilson on the top of the barrel on a silver plate of identical form to the one with the Craigs Creek. Now, this is the kind of document that I put together on, and I owned this at the time, so it's not filled out as to the owner. But when I was doing my research, I used this in making all these measurements. Joe Kindig in York, Pennsylvania, was up there, and he said, "Why are you making all these measurements?" And I thought it was pretty obvious why, but I've never been asked that before. So I told him that I was trying to answer questions that I didn't know enough to ask. And that's what a set of statistics does for you. And it's proven to be very valuable. But I also have the permission to publish and so forth. But as I said, I owned this at the time. And so the things that the form doesn't, I put that on the bottom or on the back and take notes that I think will be useful in the future. And there's the rifle. Remember I mentioned the rhythm scroll of the Roanoke. This is the later version. The engraving fits in with all that. And this bird is found on North Carolina rifles, a couple of Pennsylvania ones, and I found the source for that pattern. It was a Birmingham English cloak pin that you screw into the wall for your curtains or on your bedpost to tie them off. And those are variations of that. And I think that commercial brass that's coming from England was making its way to gunsmith shops, and I found other patterns that were toe plates, for instance, where the tall case clock hinges, they just cut it right off. And of course, the brass that they're making with the mounts is scrap brass, and so they mount.
You call that a missile feat?
No, I don't. You know, with the Honaker group, which we'll be seeing something related to that, and the Proctor up in Wythe County had a similar bird. It's like, you know, it's looking back like that. And we just called it turkey, but then we found two of them that have birds or another animal in it. So it's a bird of prey to them. And because they're anyway, it's so it's hard, you know, it doesn't pay sometimes to second guess how these people are seeing it. There's the old familiar diamond, and this is the headwaters of the James John Wilson. Detail of the forend. And people today call these devices that hold the barrel and stock together, this rectangular piece that goes all the way through, and there's a fitting on the bottom of the barrel. They call that a loop, and this is a draw loop. And it's just a regular loop if it is secured by a pin, but they call it a draw loop. You got the draw, and the loop is the bottom of the barrel. And I started finding that terminology in the Virginia manufacturer of arms. We're making muskets. The guys were paid for looping and sighting musket barrels when they did piecework. And then I started finding found one out in western Virginia that said that it had loops of copper with silver heads. So then I knew what they were talking about. And they won't call this an inlay. This is called silver about the loops. So there's a Winchester Rifle by Simon Locke advertised for in the 1808 newspaper out in Kentucky was stolen. And they knew how to spell his name correctly and everything. And they described it pretty well. And that's where I got that little record. And these have triggers, not triggers. The trigger that you pull, it's a trigger. T-R-I-C-K-E-R. John Wilson's Davidson County, Tennessee entry. John M. Wilson, gunsmith, born in Virginia. And you see his wife and children, and the youngest one's a female, all born in Virginia. And so he had recently moved from Botetourt County or some other location. I've got to go back and run tax records to see if he disappears in that late 40s period. So those things, there are Botetourt gunsmiths that went to Missouri, that went to Illinois, and moved west to the gun trade. Now, this is George Wilson, who died January, whose inventory is taken January 10th, 1799. Has a number of gunsmithing tools and things in the inventory. But this man could not be John Wilson's father because he was born later, so there's a pretty big family. And this man repaired a fusee watch at the order of the court of Augusta in the 1760s, so he was established there early. And the Simpson family was described in a 1748 document in Augusta County, in which the group of people lived around the mouth of the Cow Pasture River. 8 or 9 people signed it, and some woman named Campbell was being called as a witness in a trial in Stanton, and they all swore an oath that she was a well-known liar and could not be trusted with anything, much less a witness in the court. So there's some family that are called Stinson, and I think that's our Simpsons, because the creek they live on is called Simpson's Creek. And our Alexander Simpson, the gunsmith in 1795, sells land there. You've never found out how they got it. And you find that sometime. But anyway, another John Wilson that's iron mounted, has a checkered wrist and a simple 2-piece iron patch box. Very fine piece of curly maple. And the checkering on the wrist up here, these little diamonds, right here, every one of them has a silver nail driven in it. There's hundreds of them. And with the shrinkage, when you hold it, it grabs your hand. I mean, it's got, the wood shrinks away and the metal sometimes protrudes, and so it's all iron mounted, but the gun's in great shape. It's not 9 or 10 blocks from where we are now in our collection. That's the reverse, and the again with diamond. This rifle I collected myself years ago from Howard Sykes in Covington, Virginia. He lived on Fudge Street in Covington. And he was the last working member of the Sykes family that were apprenticed in the Revolutionary War to the Schroeders up in Rockingham County. And Howard made modern guns as well. But when as a kid, I would go over there and buy barrels from him that would attach to build a rifle, because there were no commercial barrels in the late 1950s that rented down good for making muzzle loaders. And so I'd go over there and get an original barrel and clean it up. And so I'm back in the corner in his big shop, which had guns all splashed, looked like a school of fish. All these long guns, you know, like 50 or 60 of them. Roddy, you've been there. And it was back in the corner, and I found this 47-inch barrel that was tapered with flare, and it was wonderful. I said, "This is the one I want, Howard." He said, "I can't sell you that. I got the rest of that old thing around here somewhere." So we shuffled around all this stuff, and came out with that 1 7/8" thick stock, beautiful iron mounting. I love the hinge on it. It's got 7 leaves, and the middle one is the widest, and then they diminish narrower and narrower out on either side. Beautiful workmanship, and kind of another diamond statement, wouldn't you think? Yeah. What a nice rifle. I don't know who made it. It's got Winchester influence in the carbon. But I just love that. I think it's a wonderful thing. And the top of that butt plate has 7 small facets going all the way across. Get back to, in Greenbrier County in 1773, at the store over there, the stores are the source of most of the shooting matches up and down the Valley, Virginia. The stores have they have the prizes, that they can, set up a shooting match. They have the rum to sell to them. That doesn't necessarily help their aim, probably. But I've looked at some of those pledges. I mean, these guys are drinking rum like it was water. Although they're probably afraid of the water. But at any rate, more than 50% of the guys who signed up chances to shooting the new year got 7 chances. That's how prevalent that tradition is. And someone told me that's 900 times in the Bible. I haven't tried to proofread that. Somebody else here can do that. Fine iron mounts, good thick stock. As I said, 47-inch barrel, about 45 caliber. And had this fine vine carbon. You can see that's very worn. It was once very extensive. That's near the balance where you carry the rifle. And these buckhorn rear sights, the one on the right, I don't know exactly when they start being made on Kentucky rifles, but it seems to be in this region of the headwaters of the James. And I just don't have a benchmark, a dated rifle that would help track that back. But this engraving at the muzzle with the crescents, that's very, very typical of rifles made in that region. Now this one it's been a problem for my attribution for a long time for me. The patch box has got rather poor engraving, but its absolute outline and proportions have affinity with John Haymaker and Winchester. And John Haymaker was son of Adam Haymaker. He bought his lot in 1753. For those of you that study long rifles, that's well before Dicker started his apprenticeship. So the long rifle was around a long time before the classic attributions in Pennsylvania. And I think it's a product of a more broad cultural movement, not one single place. There's a lot of evidence for that. But anyway, this one, the one Adam Haymaker rifle that we can identify has behind the cheek piece AH carved in flowing script with generals and so forth. And if this one's PH, I don't know. It's hard to read. But Philip Haymaker moved to Fincastle in 1797. And he spawned the Haymaker town and all that. And right at the end of the 90s, I forgot which year, he sells his share of Lot 202 that was granted by Lord Fairfax in 1753. And it says he's of Fincastle in Botetourt County. That document identified that. And so, and I think he went on to die in the 1840s. Philip Haymaker did in Christiansburg. Jacob Crowder, I think he's Fincastle. There are those who have attributed his work to North Carolina. I don't agree with that. And this one is signed J.C. Beckett, 1809, so it's part of our Latin inscription. When it first turned up, people run around trying to find a man with that name, J.C. Beckett. They didn't know it was a Latin signature. And that's not that unusual. But I know of 4 rifles by this man at this point. And the Crowder, he's here a lot, and then he's up in Rockbridge in the documents. And when he died in Rockbridge, he was a distiller. But that doesn't mean he wasn't a rifle maker earlier. And there's some diamonds there too, right? The half moon under the cheek piece, I think that's an Indian's head. And for much of my life, I've known about long rifles, I couldn't figure out why they have so many half moons on them, because they're not Turkish or from the east. Some of them, yes, are Masons, but not many. That might have spawned it. But what I have found out is that it's a battle formation, and both sides use it, the Indians and the whites. And so in a battle in the woods, the superior force will try to get a half moon on you and running into the trees, tree to tree. And I found that in a series of skirmishes in 1758 in Botetourt County, Virginia, where that was described. And interestingly enough, those boys beat up the Cherokee pretty bad. I was surprised that they killed 3 of them and lost 1. And they scalped them and threw them in the river. They get money for the scalp. The conflict with Native Americans had so influenced American culture, developing culture, that by the time of the French and Indian War, scalping is a legitimate rule of war. 100% vote in Williamsburg to put a 10-pound bounty on all male Indian scalps above the age of 12 in 1755. And 100% vote. Everybody voted against it. And then they forgot to allow that the Cherokee were allies. And that caused a lot of problems. 10 pounds on the Virginia frontier will buy you one of the greatest rifles you've ever seen and a good horse. But now not many people came out with those Indian scalps. We could go a long way and talk about all that brutality. But I think that's why they're on the Kentucky rifle. There's a couple of Pennsylvania ones that very clearly look to me to be images of it. This rifle has 2 buttons on the patch box near the butt plate. And you think they are for opening. When you push that button, it has a pin that pricks your finger. And they've got springs to make them look like they're working. The actual push button to open the door is this spot right in here. That's identical to a rifle up the valley by one of the Grandstaff families rifles. And it's the identical design. Sometimes you just can't figure out how these things were transmitted. Close-ups of the features on this one. Again, this is a lot of wear. And most of these long rifles have saddle wear. They were traveling by a horse a lot more than people tend to think of them being out in the wilderness with the rifle hand carrying it. And that's true when they dismount, but they travel great distances on horses. And here's the muzzle from the Upper James again on this Curator rifle. See the scallops there. And the half moons in that sight to tighten it up, it's a brass base, or punches, shaped punches. We're done with shaped punches. One of the great rifle makers of Botetourt County, he was in Amsterdam, he was in Town. That was the last name of the man who set up the town, by the way. And he had a farm on the Back Creek or Looney's Creek. You know where that is. He started showing up in Texas here in 1805. He's born in Pennsylvania. I think he probably was trained in and around York, Pennsylvania. But this rifle is the finest one and the earliest one by him. And it has lots of association with the Honaker family. And so I don't really understand how that occurred. But he's one of the best engravers in the lot. And often uses this outside lap of the hinge turned out on the outside, and so do the Honakers. And very, very fine work. Sometimes the black and white shows the engraving better than the color. And you can see his fine cuts. His engraving is really characterized, if I can get this thing to work again here, by this almost jet airplane look. with all those parallel cuts. He uses them in a lot of places. The polluted knuckle on the return of the trigger guard is characteristic of the Roanoke family, and then becomes common in lots of places in southwest Virginia. And this has got a hole in it, and most Kentucky rifles, that was used for either a steel pick or a feather. And a lot of times that feather was used in loading to keep powder from coming out of the touch hole when you rammed the ball in. And frequently that feather is from a bird of prey that has a square shank. The feather has a square shank, so that would stop the powder from coming out, but allow air to slip out without pushing powder out into the pan. I've seen those in ones that didn't have an inlay, in which the feather was broken off and it was preserved well, the shank of it. This is a rifle with a John Sights barrel, but everything else is George Peterman. And it's in the exhibit here. It's a fabulous rifle, and it has survived in wonderful condition. And we don't often see long rifles in great condition. That's one of the things that we'd like to see more of. But the lock was converted to percussion from flintlock, and whoever owned it or a relative brought it back to Peterman, and he made the conversion. Got his engraving and so forth. So it was made in Peterman Shop. And probably the customer came up with this barrel from a Sights rifle that had been wrecked or whatever. You just don't know what this history is, but lots of estate sales have barrels that are attached to them. And you see sometimes court cases over a rifle gun barrel. Mr. Haymaker was accused of 1771 in Winchester of feloniously stealing one rifle gun barrel of the property of Zachariah Bell. So, but look at the engraving on that flower. It is just spectacular. And you can see that right here in the exhibit. Silver side plate. You can see that kind of shading and a beautiful flowing design, breaking the mode of the sort of angular side plate. Close up of the lock showing the hammer and the kind of snail feature for the drum that he put on. And that's an imported lock. Most Kentucky rifle makers in any period were buying locks at the store, imported from Germany or England, and particularly in the colonial period. But after, by the time you get in the late 18th and 19th century, most of the guns made in the South are British locks. The German stuff tends to disappear, importation from Germany. Engraved cone plate. This wood piece is the push button for the patchbox latch. It's concealed as a part of the wood. I saw John Painter was done that way, and I believe John Painter, he's probably better known makers in this region. I don't have one in the lecture, but there's one here. I think he apprenticed to Peterman sometime in the 20s or 30s. That's from looking at the rifles, not finding thought. The thimbles on this rifle are made of very long brass and filed in the middle to appear to be two, and they're all the way out. And the silver covers the pin that holds the barrel. So the barrel has hooks on the bottom that will slid in to the pins. You don't have visible draw loops or pins. That's a great piece of work. This is the only signed George Peterman. It was in a Texas collection. First time I saw it was in a gun report in 1958. And that same collection had a John Sights. It was signed John Sights Fincastle, signed J. Sights Fincastle on the silver plate. I've never seen the one spelled out Fincastle, but it's out there somewhere. The engraving on this is pretty heavily worn. This gun's about 1845 to 50, getting toward the end of his career. There's that back action lock. And you see a real bad period repair under the locks of the porous wall stuck in there. And the engraving was worn off. He engraved that lock even though it was a commercial purchase. And that's probably the best piece of silver work from Botetourt County that I'm aware of, for certain. That's a lot of silver. It gets your attention. I like his card combination better, but it's a pretty spectacular rifle. And there again, you can see that knuckle balloon on the guard. Beautiful toe plate with the wonderful piercings, deeply engraved on the sculpted. Now, a few years ago, a rifle turned up from Indiana, and this is it. And Alexander McGilvery is in the 1850 census in Harrisonburg listed as a gunsmith. And we had no idea until this rifle turned up that he had worked in Botetourt. He was apprenticed to John Crummy in Harrisonburg. And Crummy was his guardian, so I don't know what happened to his parents, but he was apprenticed in Harrisonburg. And then this rifle comes up, and it was the first one I'd ever seen with a script signature of Alex McGilvery. And everything on it is Peterman. I mean, it's just like Peterman made it. But I think he came down here and was in that shop. I don't know if he indentured himself for 4 years or not, but all of the design of the engraving, the execution, it's really George Peterman's art. And the carving screams it, the open side plate screams it. And so when I saw this, the next Monday I was in the State Library. And 1829, Alexander McGilvery, through 1846. He's in the tax record every year, and one of them has the abbreviation Fincastle. He never paid a penny of tax, which means he didn't own any taxable property, but he had to be in the militia, and the tax record of the militia is one and the same as far as a global goes. And so in 1846 he disappears, and in 1850 he's back in his hometown in Harrisonburg. I don't know if he went up there directly. He may have gone off the Spanish-American War. Lots of people from the Shenandoah Valley marched off to that war. Sometimes overlooked. A second rifle by him. All the Harrisonburg people still don't believe this, by the way. This one has gone back to what he was taught in Crummage Shop on the door of the patch box. The engraving on the door of the patch box is a lot more what he learned from John Crummy than what he got from Peter. But anyway, it's a really high-grade rifle. I think this is the first time this has been made public that he was working down here. Fabulous stuff. The fluted thimbles, very French in style. And we saw this before. We'll take a look at a couple of J. Sights rifles. This is the early one that shows the Schwarrier style. You'll see it in our family in Bath County, so it could be George Sights came here in '93, or, George Seitz up in Harrisonburg, or Henry Seitz, who moved down here in '93, because it's George Seitz's signature that identifies the patchbox engraving. But since they both are credited to the same man, you probably can't tell the difference. And the Schroeder family was in the west side of west of Harrisonburg. And this is the fine card rifle. It probably dates right up to the middle '90s. It could be a little earlier, which would mean it was made up in Rockingham County. I really like that card. It's bold and high and very much Schroeder-esque. So if you've got George Shumway's book on the Schroeder family, there's a whole chapter missing there. And some of those guns belong down here, either up in Rockingham or Botetourt. John Seitz appears by the court records to be George's son who grew up down here. But Henry married Mary Dunlap in Rockingham in 1783. John Seitz put this ad in the newspaper, and that's a transcript of it. You'll notice at the end he said, let's see, how does that go? Times are a little tough. We'll sell guns cheap for cash. And times were really tough. And John Seitz in the 1850 census of the industry was listed as making 75 rifles a year. Now, making 75 rifles a year, that's not one man. That's a huge staff. And he was running a big business. So in 1834, he's off to Missouri. And when he died out there in the 1850s, he had a gigantic inventory and had 5 rifling benches in that shop. So he was producing right up there where the Oregon Trail begins. This is a signed John Seitz. And signed Seitz, F, Virginia. I think that means Fincastle. It could be Beckett in Virginia, but it's probably Fincastle. I think there's a similar matchbox in the exhibition here. Much rarer are the pistols. Now, this is an insurance policy for John Welch. There's a clock out there that he made the movement, signed in this exhibit. Did anybody here know he was a gunsmith? This is an insurance policy of 1819. And let's see if I can get this to work properly. That's the translation. That's a pretty big shop. Later, John Seitz bought a lot from him at Fincastle. I'm going to go back and try to figure out if he bought this big shop out. Well, this is a letter, let's see, 1784, William Christian to Thomas Madison. And I'm going to show you parts of it. William Christian was son of Israel Christian. Israel Christian gave the land for the lot that Fincastle was on. He was a major Indian trader, store runner in Stanton. He traded with the Cherokee. He was twice captain of a company of Rangers. He was twice voted as a Burgess from Augusta County. That's Israel. And William is his son. So he's saying in this letter at the beginning, he's talking about moving to Kentucky. And I think this is a wonderful, and our overseers down to Dr. Fleming's, will be William Fleming, which is right near here. And as far as your house, I'm longing to hear how your pulse beats toward Kentucky, and whether your late sale has estranged your affections or not. Sounds like something written in the 1820 Romantic period, but it's a great, it shows you how the fever to go to Kentucky was. Now, in this letter, he says he sent out 20 servants to Bear Grass, and he's sending them to his sister who's already settled there, and that's Louisville. Bear Grass is where Louisville involves. And his sister's already there, and he's sending a list in 1784 of furnishings to have made. That astounded me. I was shocked that you could get your furniture made out there. But it shows what happens with the Scotch-Irish backcountry. They sell everything off, they start over, and that you don't see as many things preserved if it's like the Germans or the Quakers who keep everything moving along. It's a cultural difference. It makes it harder to study this material. He's talking about Israel here. My father was very sick, appears to be near his end. Today he seems better than yesterday. There's a lot of other business in this letter, but this is the part that's most about what we're doing here. I ought to pay Parson Smith £9 at your court. I must request you pay it. It is for a gun of one Simpson, and shall have the money when you come up to my court. Take the doctor or Simpson's receipt, because it is sort of a debt of honor as well as value received. If Dr. Fleming pays $20 to the parson or Simpson towards the pair of pistols, I am to take them. In that case, tell the parson I will send the other $10, $30 being the price, down to you, and also see what I guess may be the pay for the holsters. I was to get them made if I wanted. And this is the last thing I'm showing you, but it's a pattern seen over and over in the research that I've been finding on rifles. Some very fine rifles were made where the guy bought a new rifle to go to Kentucky. I've got 8 or 10 of those. This is the best one because he mentioned who it is. Some of the others I was able to track because their names on them. And so one's in Rockbridge County, and the guy makes the rifle and put the owner's name on the lid. And before the end of 1794, he has a child born in Kentucky. He's bought a brand new rifle. And of course, in all those gaps, the Indians are out there sharpening those gunning knives to collect those new rifles. Mr. Christian was killed in 1788 by Indians. And this is the Isle of Man stamp issued to him. Isn't that funny? Nobody around Virginia knows his name is the Isle of Man. Let's see. That's what each of these stamps say. They were quite proud of him. Thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have. And I'll take a few questions. If any of you feel you want to get home and go to sleep, or if you're waking up from my boring talk, feel free to leave. I'll answer a few questions. Thank you. Anybody? That's severe.
Why did they conceal the matchbox latch?
It's patchbox.
Patchbox.
Yeah, patchbox. I think it was kind of a finesse thing. Some of them work really well, and some of the ones that have those concealed latches are not very practical on a cold winter's day when you're trying to load an on a deer hunt. Your fingers won't work to do it. But in the early ones, it's usually a much more direct latch, or the big screw. It's a fake screw in the top of the butt plate, and you know, if your fingers won't push it, you can hit it against a tree. It's good open. Yes, sir.
Well, where are these guns now? Private collections?
The question is, where are the guns now? One is in the Kentucky Museum, the William Whitley rifles in the Kentucky Museum. There's a couple others that are in museum collections. In the Botetourt section, I've probably got about 40 or 50 guns to show. Most of them are private collections. And they move around, and you can't keep up with them. And also, they've gotten much more expensive. An early Honaker, the second one from Hans Jacob Honaker's shop up in Frederick County, which is today Warren County on the Shenandoah River. He moved there in 1765, and there's a Revolutionary period rifle that was in a collection here near Roanoke. And it went up at Rock Island Arsenal last Saturday. And I talked to one of my friends. I said, I hope you can keep this in Virginia. And he did, at the price of $92,000. So, but you get into that Revolutionary and before, the numbers are way down. I mean, you were lucky to have that. And the earliest one of this hand is a brass barrel rifle, which is completely extraordinary. But some Virginia rifles are sold as much as $300,000, like some of the great clocks from the Shenandoah Valley get that mark these days. Yes, sir.
In North Carolina, we had quite a few guns signed on the patch box lid.
Yeah.
And half of them signed upside down. Is that something you find in Virginia?
In the Rockbridge School, John Davidson, who was born in 1757, died in 1834, is third generation Scotch Irishman at the Forks of the James, 4 miles east of Lexington, Virginia. He put initials on there often, and then his master did that on at least one gun. And those are really heavily carved rifles with heavy moldings out to 4 in. You've probably seen some. And so I've seen a few with initials, much more of a classic North Carolina feature.
I know from what I've seen, there were a lot of trade rifles made. I mean, the trade with the Indians, and people couldn't afford these ornate things that we saw tonight. Would probably buy those. But did they have kind of a mid-range rifle?
The question is, and you're using the term rifle as you mean a long gun?
Long gun.
Okay. Well, that's something I'll take up exception to. So anyway, there was a great range of prices available. Let's say we're looking at before the Revolution, when the economy is much more stable. You look at costs of things much more clearly. As I said earlier, English, the smoothbores that come in are 99.9% English or Dutch, and they're sold at the stores. And some of the guns aimed at the Indian trade were bought by whites. It's the cheapest gun they can get, and so you find that. And there's at least 9 or 10 grades of English trade guns for the Indians. And John Wilson in London is one of the big makers of that. And a store in Fredericksburg was getting things directly from Wilson's shop, not through a factory, which is a little unusual. This is early 1770s. And they are graded out in cost. So if you have a silver bead on the barrel, that's more expensive than the one behind it. I mean, just a little piece of silver.
Right.
But it's more expensive. And the Indian trade guns are light stocked. And I mentioned a couple times that there was, long rifle maker was influenced by the Indian trade guns because they were out there. What a long rifle cost is a question that I get a lot. I didn't answer it in this lecture. In 1768, found a document in Augusta courthouse. One man is selling a rifle gun to the other, and the seller lost the gun, quote, casually lost it,
Yeah.
and is refusing to give it up, although he knows the rightful owner. Can y'all hear me in the back? Okay. And so there's a three-way suit. And so the buyer and the seller had a page written contract, and they brought it to court, and I've handled that contract. I was astonished because I know they are not, neither one of them's a gunsmith. I've worked on that. I know they're not gunsmiths. So it's a used rifle, and it says it's worth 3 pounds Virginia currency. Now, Virginia currency is different from North Carolina currency, from Pennsylvania. You have to be careful when you're dealing with that. And so Virginia currency is 25% more valuable than Pennsylvania currency. Pound sterling in London is worth 25% more than Virginia currency. And all that's controlled by law. And so when you're making comparisons, you've got to be sure that you, and in Augusta court, for instance, suits come in from Pennsylvania stores and all that. The clerk calculates it out and puts on the summons the Virginia cost. He does all that work all the time. But anyway, so this man agreed for that one rifle gun to clear 5 acres of land and split out 2,000 rails. These people worked. And I know that does not include the grubbing the stumps, because I found another suit that involved that. Now further, this contract said that neither party could trade or lend the rifle without consent. The failure of either party was a 10-pound penalty.
Wow.
Yeah, it was big. And at the bottom of it, it said the seller was to provide a horse to help facilitate the work. And so the rails are being from the trees cut and so forth. And so if you look at a rifle at 3 pounds, an average journeyman is making about 30 pounds a year, and a master at that time is making about 60 if he's in a good spot, a master of various kinds of trades. I've collected costs out of Augusta for every job I could find. And so it's 2 shillings a day for hewing logs, and that's from sun up to sundown. Reaping a field is 2.5 shillings. And so it goes on, and drovers have a separate salary for gathering the cattle and putting them in a cow pen. That's one salary. A separate salary for driving them to the market, and a separate salary for coming back, because he's providing the horse. And lots of those herds are again put together by stallers. And so William Crow in Stanton is writing to Daniel Smith way out in Southwest Virginia, and he says, we're collecting cattle from mountain to mountain. And if you want to put some cattle in our sale, we'll meet at Carvin's. William Carvin's, before, Big Lick was there as the Salt Lick, but it wasn't any big place at that time. It was a salt lick. Everybody knows that. These places get chambers of commerce and have to change all their names. Right. About 1830s, they start changing all those names. But at any rate, and one of the herds was challenged. People accused Mr. Crow of stealing cattle. So that went to court. And there was about 6 or 7 people who came in and testified how many cattle were in the herd at given points up the Shenandoah Valley from Stanton. And 3 of them were women. So the way I read that after studying it is that you get paid for pasturage by the head. So at night, somebody counts them because they're getting paid so much for each head of cattle that uses their pasturage. And so the man might not be there or whatever, so the woman, or she may be the only one who can count, who knows? But, well, that could be true. But at any rate, and so then the drovers came in and they swore an oath and said they cut these cattle out only to see them arrive back again, because it's free range. Now, how you're collecting cattle from mountain to mountain, and here's what I think's going on. If any of you have any angles on this, I'd love to hear it. But I think the store owner puts together the herd. He gets all the cattle in a cow pen, and the cow pen are at intervals to service the public. That's what the Battle of Cow Pens is about. It was a common use for serving the public. And so he gets all those cattle, then he looks at the brands of the crops, then he goes in his book, and you haven't paid for a long time, you paid with your cow today. I think that's how they're working. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. But and a lot of that stuff, they draw the brands. It's exactly like what you see in the Western, except the brands are small. Some of you know that rifle was in Kendick's book. It's got PA on the stock several times. That's a cattle brand. That was the man's brand for his cattle, and he branded his rifle. And I know that because I found one suit, and they described it, and they said the brand, and the clerk writes down a circle, and then he put in parentheses, made by a gun barrel. So, so he's eating up a fowling piece barrel with branding. So it tells you it's not a great big thing like the Western ones. And with the addition of that. Anyway, I got into that because I was trying to figure out where powder horns are coming from. And there's plenty of them around everywhere. And they get the powder horns in the fall when it's time to butcher the animals in the fall. Any other questions? I went way out on my bounds here.
Yes, sir. What was the preferred type of wood that was used?
Preferred type of wood for gun stocking is curly maple. Black walnut would be next in the long rifle, and then cherry. I've seen a lot of stocks called apple wood, and they're not. I've never seen one that was, and furniture is the same way. People will say they've got a fruit wood chest of village, and it's usually misidentified. But so those are the preferred woods, and the stocks were hewn out in the green when they're green. They didn't, like we today, dry it as a board and then saw it out. Some of that may occur, but the early tradition is to hew that out. And from Howard Sites in Covington, Virginia, I got one that was about 1790 that he had gotten out of a shop out there, the John Tyree shop, which was in Bath County. And the Colonial Williamsburg has his guide, which was the rifle guide, about 48 to 49 inches long, and fantastically carved with black walnut. And Howard went in that shop back in the 1930s. It was all there. The old ladies had locked it up and just left it. But he said, you know, it was all this junk except a few things he picked out. So, but at any rate, that's a shame that something like it. And the man was born in 1780, so John Tyree in Bath. I've seen a few rifles by him. Did you raise your hand back in the far corner?
No.
Oh, okay.
This place is a bit.
In fact, I used to threaten to put that pointer on anybody's back that they started moving out. And this this is the case of what I used to say too, is that these chairs should be on a big roller. I could push a button and these would go down and pull everybody up here closer. But anyway, I've enjoyed it. The 18th century is a fantastic place to visit. Every time you do it, you find something that's totally unexpected, and you're knocked off your pedestal thinking you know it. And the slander suits make it interesting every day, because all the four-letter words are used in the court. And I'm going to give you one naughty one that my friend Eve Ottmeyer, I took her to the courthouse with me when we had a business making hunting shirts and things. And so we went into Augusta Courthouse. And she's a weaver and a finger weaver and all this stuff. I call those people textilians, which they usually don't like, understandably. But anyway, Eve's a good friend. And so anybody that works with me on those documents, I have them read the suits, because I'm looking for things that they may not see as important. So we're close together, and so she hands, about the third docket, she hands this thing to me, and the clerk had written across it, it was a suit about land. Two couples are having trouble over their line between each other. And the clerk wrote on there, so-and-so called so-and-so's wife a Lindsay Woolsey whore. And that's the cheapest blanket. And so I called up my colleague at Colonial Williamsburg, who's curator of textiles, and read that to her on her message machine. And that was about 10 years ago, and she's never responded. I thought it was a good document of textile. Right. A good document of textile. But, you know, it's a wild place, the back country. If you ever have a chance, I'm trying to think which book is in the first meeting of the Augusta Court, 1745. I haven't read it in a long time, but the election of Burgesses, the first election, nobody was chosen, and the governor is not happy, to say the least. So the witnesses were all brought in, and it all varied a great deal. But one party took over the courthouse and was not allowing the other party to come in to vote. And they got in such a brawl that all the furniture in the courthouse was broken down, including the bar. The sheriff testified that he had to use his cane and beat them back. And the leader of the opposition party said the sheriff stood up on my feet and beat me about the face and head with the cane. So he stood up on his feet. And that's why the Moravians were afraid of the Irish Settlement. They called Augusta County the Irish Settlement, because it was a tough place. And lots of things are settled by brawling. Brawling is and so one place that you find it all the time in the court records, people come in with witnesses to say how they got their ear torn off or partly torn off, because a cropped ear is the mark of a convicted felon. And so if you get it bit off, you know, what's his name? The heavyweight champ. Mike Tyson didn't have anything on these guys. And no holds barred was the standard that was developed in Virginia. And those of you who are weak in the stomach, don't stay here. The winner is the guy who gouges the other guy's eye out. And the crowd claps and cheers, and everybody thinks it's the most wonderful hero they've seen. And the Englishman recorded that in Wheeling, West Virginia, in 1880. And in the middle of the afternoon, they're closing all the shutters and closing up. So he said, "What's happening? Why is the town closing down?" "Oh, so-and-so and so-and-so, great rivals, they came in and challenged each other to a brawl. So we're going out, we're going to have horse races first, and then the brawl is the biggest combination of it." And the Englishman was about sick when he saw this guy dangling from his optic nerve. But brawling was pretty normal way to settle things on the frontier. And it wasn't everybody, it was the class of police that come up, you know, so forth. But you have to, you know, take Daniel Morgan. For about 20 years, he was the champion brawler in Frederick County. The Saturday night fights were held at what now is Berryville, east of Winchester. And it was called, up to the 1830s, it was called Battletown.
Really?
Yeah, and as one writer wrote back then, it was for the personal conflicts Mr. Morgan was so known to. And so he could beat everybody, and that's about 40 counties now. Frederick County was in all over West Virginia and all those places. I'm going to stop. Liza's giving me the...
Might want to go to dinner.